Welcome to the Unscripted SEO Interview Podcast. Yes, it's 100% unscripted, 100% unrehearsed, 100% unedited, and 100% real. I'm your host, Mark A. Preston. Welcome back, because our guest today is somebody that's no stranger to the SEO industry and achieving great things. But I'd like him to introduce himself just so you get the full take. Hello.
Hey, Mark. Really excited to be here with you after all these years, maybe not speaking on Twitter or being being connected online. We've kind of made it real. Shall I give you my TLDR version of me?
Go for it.
So, for those of you who don't know me, which I'm sure a lot of you probably don't, my name is Ryan Darani. I've been in SEO now for a decade plus, and I'm sure it shows on my face if this is being shown in video, so it will probably show on my face. I've worn all the hats you can think of. I've been agency side, I've been in-house with brands, and I've ran a consultancy business for the last 3.5 years. Super successful, and work primarily in US, Canada, UK. Recently transitioned back into, for all of my sins, a search strategy director role at Rise at 7. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the TLDR version of me.
Wonderful. Well, I always ask everybody is, when did you start in the industry and how did you start, and what's like happened from then till now, like the whirlwind tour?
Sure. So I started in SEO in about 2011 or 12. So a little while ago. So I was only a young pup. I was about 18 or 19. So still young. And I got started in SEO by pure chance. So before SEO, I was a paid guy. I did paid acquisition for an insurance company. And my first introduction to SEO or organic search was through them. And in terms of what's changed, I think the answer is everything on the outside, but nothing on the inside. I think to the outside world, SEO feels like it's always changing. There's always new things to worry about. But I still think, and I'll kind of die on this hill, the fundamentals will always be the same. And as long as you do those things right for a very long time, I think you'll win.
Right. So do you think your background in paid dramatically helped you to conquer the SEO space?
Do you know what? Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think the benefit of worked in paid is that I speak commercially to brands and they understand dollars in versus dollars out. I do think that's probably a blind spot for a lot of, I say a lot of, I don't mean this in a kind of sweeping statement, but I think it's a blind spot for some SEOs that they struggle to speak commercially. And I'm a pretty big voice on this on Twitter and LinkedIn. Like, if you can speak in dollars and pounds, I think you're going to be a far more effective SEO than you are if you speak in title tags and meta descriptions.
Oh, without doubt. I mean, no one ever won a pitch saying you've got 2404 errors on your website.
They definitely haven't, no. And I think that is a skill. If I could go back 10 years now, I wish that was a skill I kind of lent into at the very start, because I wanted to be like the cool SEO in the weeds, know everything that I could about SEO, when in actual fact, like, simple is always more effective. And especially when you're communicating with clients, it always works best.
Yeah, I do find that, in the SEO industry, people just want the big shiny things. They want to do this and all that and neglect what's fundamentally important, which holds everything up.
Yeah, agreed. I am so bad for this, but like, we all fall victim to shiny object syndrome, right? And whether that is in the form of buying another domain that you're not going to build a project on, but you just buy it for the sake of it, or subscribing to another tool that does the same as another tool that you've had a subscription for the last year. We're always trying to look for the new silver bullet, but it just doesn't exist. And I think as soon as you take it back and just kind of zoom out a little bit and realize you're probably doing the right thing. You're just getting distracted. The better you're going to be.
Right. So, because I've known about you for quite a while, I understand some of the journeys you've been on and your successful freelance career, right? But obviously, people just see this person that's earning loads of money. They don't see the journey getting there, and the sacrifices you make and everything. So, in your own words, can you just explain that period of time as growing your freelance business?
Yeah, I think it's an amazing point to make, is that the money is the projection that people put on social media is always going to be the best version of themselves, right? That's pretty much what it exists for, is to kind of show the world what you don't want to show yourself almost. It's like your facade. And I've tried to be as honest as possible throughout everything. So the sacrifices you have to make to see success, and however people define success, is completely up to them. It could be financial, it could be career, it could be family. There will always be a trade-off. And for me, when I was building my business, the trade-off was, less time with my wife at the time, my fiance, less time with family, with friends. I missed out on a bunch of different things, whether that be holidays, occasions, parties, even Christmases. Like I at the time, nothing else occupied my mind other than growing my business. And I gave it 150% every single day. And it was exhausting. Like it can get tiring, but it's the part of success that people overlook. Like they want the end destination, which is the 10,000 or 20,000 a month, but they're not willing to put in the 200, 300, 400 hours, 500 hours you're going to have to put in to even get good at one thing. That might be landing a couple of clients. It's unfortunately a standard that's been set by like course sellers, and social media has a lot to do with a lot to answer for, is that there is no quick route to success that is underpinned by any substance of, longevity or respect. It's normally quick, spammy, churn and burn, get in, get out. And somebody is normally at the tail or the sharp end of that, which is no good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I wrote my freelance book, to help freelancers understand the reality, is because so many freelancers were coming to me, Mark, I've started, I've given my job up, and I just don't know what happened. Nothing's happening. What's going on and everything. And they're blown away by this perception of what freelancing is like. They don't understand the reality. And like you said before, they don't have that commercial background. They don't know how to present themselves or go in. But, when all that's put in front of them is, oh, yeah, well, give your job up and you can earn 200 grand a year easily, go playing golf every afternoon and doing all this. And it's just not reality.
It's not. Trust me, if I could play golf every afternoon, my handicap would be a lot lower. But it's just not the situation. At least it wasn't the situation for me. And most of the people that I've spoken to that are incredibly successful at what they do is they dedicate their life to it, and everything else is secondary. The primary focus in their life is, better in themselves, learning how to sell better, learning how to productize things, learning how to win clients, learning how to, like you said, present yourself and speak your client's language. You could be the best SEO in the world. You could be incredible. You could know everything inside out. But if you can't speak to a client in a way that makes sense to them, it means nothing. And those kind of people are brilliant A or B players at an agency or a brand. They very often don't survive as a freelancer.
Yeah. So what's been your biggest learning curves throughout the journey?
The biggest one by far is my ability or lack of to delegate. So, and I'm sure you've been through the exact same thing, and I'm probably sure you've seen it 1,000 times, is that you try to do everything, and because you're scared of letting go, or you think, oh no, it's going to eat into my profit or it's going to eat into my pockets, I can't go and hire somebody. It took me a good 18 months to realize that. Like, there are some things I just couldn't do all of the time, like whether that be somebody helping you with emails, whether that be somebody helping you with your calendar, not necessarily doing the work for you, but just organizing your life a little bit better. So delegating was a huge learning curve, and the mindset shift, actually, because it was a very low ticket mindset I had. As soon as I realized, actually, if I put a little bit of my money into this thing over here, it allows me to go and focus on more important things like getting new business, or going to speak at a conference, or speaking on a webinar, or whatever, something that's going to actually bring business in. And it's like that old saying, like, you get stuck working in the business rather than on it. And I think delegating helps freed me up for sure.
Yeah. Didn't you spend a lot of time with Craig Campbell, and he sort of helped you, to realize a lot of things?
Yeah, Craig, in the very early stages, and to be honest, up until present day, has been almost like the voice of reason. When I met Craig when I was employed by an agency about 4.5 years ago. And I flew out to Amsterdam. I didn't know who he was, i.e., I've never met him in real life. It was completely off the cuff, really random experience. And the biggest thing that Craig is great at doing is helping people see, or at least he helped me see, that there is more behind the curtain. And all it takes is just either the action to go and do the thing, whatever that thing is, or that you believe there is more behind the curtain.
Yeah, I think I've known Craig for a long time. One thing we've both always said is you can give people the golden ticket. You can tell them everything, but majority of them won't achieve anything because they just don't want to put the effort into it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. This effort, because in order to get from where you are now to where you want to be, something has to change because it's not working the way you're doing it.
Yeah, totally agree. I think a lot of this is almost like a paradox in itself, is that the answers for a lot of people that want to see success are normally in front of them. And they either think, nah, that can't be right. It can't be that easy. It can't be that simple. Like, the process is just being consistent and doing the hard work all of the time. That's the secret. They just don't believe it, or they do believe it and they haven't got the grind in them to go and execute. If someone said to you, look, actually, it could be a millionaire in the next 3 years, but you have to give up the next 3 years of your life to do it. Most people would be like, I wish it was next month, and give up. It's that mindset of they just haven't got the longevity. And some people, that's fine. Like, some people don't want to do it, but they need to accept that that's their reality and not fool themselves anymore, because it's not healthy to think, oh, I want this thing, but only if it's easy.
Yeah, if everything was easy, then we'd all be millionaires overnight, but it's not.
No.
People, and this is, the conversation I wanted to have with you, because, people look at somebody like yourself and just see the successful person. They don't see the journey and the heartache and the sacrifices you've made to get there. And I think it really needs to be understood in the industry that, there's no silver bullet. You have to graft and make it work.
Yeah, if I had a filming crew with me from day zero up until 12 to 8, like the first 18 months of my building my business, there would have been tears, there would have been temper tantrums, there would have been panic, anxiety, like low sleep. There's building a business is incredibly exciting and fun, but it's also an incredibly pressurized environment. and it all stops with you. Everything stops with you. If people don't pay, guess whose problem it is? Yours. If people decide to quit, guess whose problem it is? Yours. There's nobody to hide behind. There's nobody to look to. There's nobody to grab your hand and say, look, I'm going to save you. And I really wish that picture was painted more clearly online, because it's not always amazing fun. You're on the beach with a laptop, having a cocktail. There might be bits of that, but that's the bits you see on social media, right? But the rest of it, the deeper part of the iceberg is normally putting out fires and dealing with hard stuff and dealing with difficult conversations and, never being able to switch off. And I wish more people saw that side.
Oh my God, the dealing with difficult conversations is one thing that a lot of people who approach me actually struggle with. Just the communication bit, how to communicate something, or somebody's giving me this grief. How do I handle it? That alone, forget about everything else. That alone, just being able to communicate with people in a certain way is a skill you have to learn as you go along.
Yeah, I do think that the leap from, let's just say, for example, somebody's an in-house SEO and they are, let's just assume they're their middle tier in like the hierarchical structure of an organization. When I say middle tier, I don't mean their actual skill set, but let's just say in an organization they're middle tier. To go from that to running your own business is a tremendous leap. And I think people have become naive to, like you said, to how important being able to have difficult conversations with, big clients that are giving you their money, to be able to mitigate risk, to be able to negotiate, being able to put fires out effectively, being able to liaise with 3 different agencies and 3 different stakeholders. And it gets really tricky. Whereas when you're employed by an agency or a brand, you normally have layers of people to protect you from some of this stuff. And once that goes away, Jesus, is it a shock? And I think if people really want to go into freelancing, I think what they should do is learn those skills first and feel comfortable in really difficult situations. And whether that means putting your hand up at your business and say, actually, I'd like to be in this really uncomfortable midterm renewal chat with a difficult client, and let me see how it goes, and start to figure out how to navigate those situations. And that means when you go to speak to clients or have really difficult conversations with your own clients, you kind of have a better understanding of how to deal with them.
Yeah. So if you was to sum up the state of the SEO industry at present in one sentence, what would it be?
Delusionally frictioned. So
can you expand on that? Because I really want to know now.
I can unpack it as like delicately as I can. I have been around for a long, as have you, long time, and the divisiveness of SEO has always been a big problem for me. There is an assumption that if you do X thing and if the thing is you follow Google's guidelines, or you're in the quote unquote white hat side of the business or the industry, that you are an immediate enemy to the people that don't do those things. And it becomes this real, battle of ego. I am subjectively better than you because this one thing that I did worked and what you did is wrong. And the AI overview, SGEs and the HCU, all of these things have just made the division so much bigger. There are people that are panicking about AI, that are saying that SEO is on the decline. There are jobs are plateauing, all of this other stuff, and there are people on the other side of the coin saying I'm making more money than I've ever made. And it creates this really distasteful divide between people that has been perpetuated by Google. And people aren't recognizing that. Like, this is Google's fault that there is a division. And it just blows my mind.
Well, I'm going to say there's a lot more people after, the latest leak that's
Yeah.
not on Google's side anymore.
And I think that's about time, to be honest. I'm so glad that happened. I think it's nothing but a good thing.
Yeah, but thing is, you should always be on the side of the business,
Mm-hmm.
and doing what's best for the business to not only move the financial needle, but the profit needle as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you cannot help the business to increase revenue, where are they going to find the money from to sustain you long term?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so simple. Like the equation is so simple. If it makes money, continue to do it. Obviously, there is a moral argument about what the tactics are to make the money. But as long as you're not hurting anybody, you're not doing anything illegal, you're not, breaking any federal or state laws or whatever. If you're just going against Google's guidelines and it works, so be it. Like the risk is completely on your head. And this is where I think experience in in doing this yourself is going to make a big difference, because what tends to happen is these kind of people that jump from agencies to their own brand or their own business, for example, it's never been their money to play with. And then when it is, it becomes a different ball game, because you're like, well, have you actually tested this to make sure this isn't going to spunk $5,000 of my cash? No. Okay. Well, I'm probably not going to do it then. And I think that, that's the sort of stuff that as an SEO, it should be in your toolkit. You should be testing things. You should be making sure that it's not going to burn your client's cash or put them in a sticky situation. There's a difference between black hat SEO and just straight bad SEO. And the narrative or the tactics of how those things are achieved is completely irrelevant. If it's bad SEO and it's white hat, quote unquote white hat, it's still bad SEO. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's so true that, I mean, when I've gone in and trained marketing teams, I'll say, what's your strategy? I said, well, would it still be the same strategy if it was your money you're spending?
Mm-hmm.
Think of it like that. Oh, well, no, I wouldn't do that. I said, well, why are you doing it? Because we've got this pot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But, well, that's, it's just the whole mindset of, and I think SEOs that are business minded have been through the pain of running their own businesses. Maybe it's not an SEO agency or whatever, something in the past. They understand the business surrounding it and understand business challenges are the ones that connect better with everything.
Totally agreed. I think that is if anybody takes anything away from this podcast actionable, it's that, play with your own cash and see how it feels. Whether that be you launch a shop online to sell candles, it's irrelevant. The threat is still on your pockets. And once you start to think about, return on investment, you start to think about profit, you start to think about resources and resource allocation, you become a much clearer mind, which means that you can strip away 90% of the fluff that nobody needs to concern themselves with. And you speak in simple cash in versus cash out. Is this thing that you're going to do for me, Mr. SEO, going to earn me money? Or is it putting my money at risk? If one of those two things is true, i.e., if it's putting me at risk, don't do it. If it's going to make me money, please go and do that. That's how I would view things.
Yeah. There was a business I worked with quite a number of years ago, and they described it to me. Well, by not doing this, how much money am I actually going to lose?
Yeah. Again,
which is a different take on the same thing. But it's the mindset of, well, we've got this plan, but you're not going to see a penny until 12 months' time. Well, if we did it this way, we could start generating money a lot sooner. So from now till then, how much money is being lost? Yeah.
And I do, I've seen this problem time and time and time again, unfortunately. People, especially SEOs, their pride is massive. And normally is accompanied by their ego, unfortunately. And for example, if I put myself back in the shoes of when I was consulting for, any number of clients, if SEO was going to get the smallest pot of returns for the first 3 months, then I would divert budget elsewhere. It's as simple as that. Like, I've been employed by you to do a job. If my job means that I have to give the paid team, 60% of my budget to go and execute to get leads while we're waiting for the SEO to, bear fruit, then I have to do that. You can't say to somebody, oh, your contract with me is 6 months and you're going to see returns in month 5. That's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And you'll start, when you do things like that, you'll have 100% of the time really difficult conversations at the end of the month with a client saying, what are you doing with my money?
I mean, I think a couple of days ago, I posted a tweet. I can't remember which one it was, but there was more than one person saying, oh, well, that were it. PPC versus SEO and timescales. And like a few people said, well, 12 months isn't that long to see a return from SEO. I said, and I'm thinking, Christ, if you cannot provide a return on investment in 12 months from SEO, you want to find a different career.
Yeah, you should, do something else. And that definitely comes back to what you said earlier, is that they've never been in a situation where their money is being played with. So that 12 months to them is like, well, that's great return for a finance site, and it's like, is it? Because they could, a commercial leader in a business will say, well, it's going to take me 12 months and 100 grand with an SEO to get this return. Or I could take that same 100 grand and deploy it over a month into paid and get 4 times my money back very quick. So they have to remember that commercial conversation is happening in somebody else's head.
Yeah, and I think SEOs who work within a team, in an agency who's working with big clients and that, they don't realize that, well, it's not them themselves that's achieved it. It's the collectiveness of all the team that's achieved, and piggybacking on the authority and everything and brand presence of what's already been built in the past. And I think some people who are in those positions, well, I'm going to say what I think, are somewhat naive in thinking they're a lot better than they really are, right? And suddenly they decide to jump ship, go freelance, and suddenly, oh, well, I'm not achieving anywhere near the same success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you know what? That's it's really difficult for me to say this because it's almost hypocritical in a way, but I think there is a massive difference between, and this, before I say this, let me caveat it, I don't mean this for everybody, but just my hands-on experience with this in a kind of a big pot of numbers. There is a distinct difference between an agency SEO and an SEO. If somebody comes into an agency, they get given Healthline, and all they've got to do is produce content for Healthline. That's not really SEO. You're, like you said, you're leveraging somebody else's hard work and claiming it as your own. As soon as you go back to zero and you've got 5K to play with from, a middle ground brand, you can't do the same stuff. You have to know, what type of links to get, how to, even where to get them. What type of content, what type of profit are you going to get on that content? How much is it going to cost you to go and get that content produced? You have to really start to think about pennies and pounds. And I think the tactics and the resources between agency SEO and people that are SEOs for themselves make the difference. It's not that one is less skilled, commercially probably, yeah, but it's just about the knowledge of how they handle money. Yeah,
I remember watching the podcast that you did with Carrie and Craig. And there was one thing that I think it was Craig that mentioned, don't show me this massive brand you've worked on. Show me something that you've built from nothing, and that's I think no matter where you are in the industry, I think, like you said, starting your own site from nothing, brand new, and building it up is a totally different skill than coming in and working on a very well-known established brand.
100%. And you can apply that logic to anything. Like, if I go to the gym every single day and I diet and I'm able to get to 10% body fat and have abs, versus somebody who's got the money to go and have liposuction, right? The results are still going to be the same, but you've cheated. You've definitely cheated. It's the same as using a brand. You're cheating because you're leveraging their brand authority, the size of it, whatever. And I think being able to start your own projects and being able to manage them and run them and see the return on investment and see how long things actually take to win is where either SEOs are either, you either make them or break them. There's tons of projects that I've done that just didn't work out. But it was great because I learned what not to do. And then equally, there are tons of projects that I've made great money on, that I used my failures to guide me. And I feel like if you don't have that balance and you always see your failures as the end of the road or your wins as your great success, you're never going to be, in my books, a really good SEO, because you either give up too soon or you ride the successes too hard.
Yeah. Now, I want to understand your leap from running a successful freelance business to suddenly it probably wasn't overnight, but what seemed like overnight, a shift into going into Rise at 7. I mean, just talk me through the realities of that.
Yeah, I think I've tried to be for the last 3 years. I'll give you the real version of it. When I started freelancing, my single purpose was money. There was nothing else I wanted. I wanted to earn a ton of money, and I didn't really care how I got it. Everything else, like I've said, was pretty much secondary in my life. So whether that be health, connections, the bigger purpose of why I'm even doing the thing in the first place, they all took a seat on the sidelines while I figured that out. What people will realize, hopefully, is that if you become, successful in your own right, and it means that it's some sort of financial success, and you think that money is going to be the thing that saves you, you're going to be in for a very rude awakening. I had all the money I ever needed, like more than I ever needed. And I didn't splurge. I didn't treat myself like I was any better off than I was before I started my business, because that's just how I am. I bought myself a couple of nice things, but nothing crazy. And I got to the point where, and this is another thing that people don't speak about, being a business owner or being a freelancer is very lonely, very isolating in two ways. One, you don't have that day-to-day interaction with somebody that you work with, unless it's the client who is paying your bills. And you also don't have the luxury, or at least I don't, because of where I live, of being able to interact with other people like me. So it becomes very isolating. And when you try to mingle with normal social situations, like your family, your friends, all I ever wanted to talk about, which nobody ever did talk about, was my business. Right. And that made me really unhappy, because I couldn't enjoy myself. I couldn't enjoy just having a beer and talking about, I don't watch football, but football. So it started to take a toll on me. And then I started to consult for Rise at 7 about a year and a half ago. And it was like I'd been taken out of this isolation and put into a very vibrant cultural shock. And I really enjoyed it. And it was about that same time I fell out of love with freelancing. I fell out of love with the headaches. I fell out of love with always being somebody's punching bag and dealing with the stresses of running a business. And I wanted to spend more time with my wife, my dog, my family, my friends. And I wish people had more humility to recognize that if you are successful financially, that doesn't define who you are as a person. So if you want to start a business and it fails, or you don't enjoy it anymore, there is no rule book to say that you can't give it up. And I think that comes back to ego. and being like how people perceive me. I could have really hid that and not told people that I went back to, an agency life. But I was really open about it. And it's because, to be really honest, I just don't care what people think of me. And I think it's a really healthy mindset to get yourself into.
Yeah, I've never bothered what other people think about me. And
Yeah.
does it matter? I don't, I just plod on doing what I do. If
Yeah.
people want to disagree, I'll have an honest conversation, a polite one. Say, well, why do you think this? Whatever. But I'm on the road to semi-retirement now. And like a lot of people ask me,
Congratulations, by the way.
huh?
Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, like you said, but it doesn't happen. You have to put hard work and sacrifice. And somebody asked me the other day, well, what does semi-retirement look for you? I said, well, it'll just allow me to buy more time with the family.
Mm.
And that's how I describe it. That's my mission, to literally buy me more time to spend with the family. And that's how I describe the journey I've been on. I'm 55 this year. And when I turned 50, someone clicked saying, well, I'm not going to be able to retire just doing this. Even though I loved it, something needs to change. And my whole mindset and everything was focused on the trajectory. And like you, it's no one else's business. Does it really matter what other people think you've done or give up or whatever? But for yourself, going into an agency like Rise at 7 from a freelancing, that must have been a bit of a, I don't know, shock or difference in your life and how things are done. And, especially with the mindset of Rise at 7 and how they think about the industry, they kind of, a lot further forward than most in the industry.
Yeah, it was a couple of things. Yes, it was a shock because they are a great bunch of people. They're high energy, and for me, going from being, I don't really need to be high energy when I was a freelancer, and it was just me by myself to then be put into a room full of really high impact, high energy people was like, whoa. I was a bit taken aback. But the benefit of the thing, and this is, again, I always see this as a way that I've been able to accumulate new knowledge, right? And running a business for yourself is fantastic, but there are parts of running a business yourself that you're going to miss naturally because the size of the business or whatever it is. In being in Rise at 7 and the position that I'm in at Rise at 7 is my eyes have been open to a whole different side of business. How it's, operationally run. We're talking about different levels of utilization and resource allocation and all of this, like, stuff that I would probably expect to hear in my 40s as I've kind of progressed further down my career. I've been really lucky. I've shortcut that and I've been able to learn that stuff now. And I see it as nothing but a positive. And me and Carrie have always been really aligned on where the industry is going and where it has come from. And it's incredibly positive in that sense. So it was a shock, but equally at the same time, quite a nice bit.
So just so I have some context, is mainly the clients you work on now, are they very established brands?
Some, yes, some are very enterprise level brands. And then some are, and this is predominantly, I would say, based on Rise's position in the market. Some of them are slightly more underdog brands that have had like maybe seed rounds in funding, or they've got a reasonably sized budget, but they can't deploy it in the same way as an enterprise an enterprise company. But yeah, the vast majority are larger brands. Yeah, so it's again quite nice in that regard because I'm no longer in the weeds. Which is great for me. I'm like, I sit and watch and I can see performance moving and I can see things happening that if I was actually in the weeds doing the thing, I probably would miss.
Yeah. So are you the person that sort of puts the strategy together and helps the team to deploy it?
Yeah, exactly that. So my function is to create the strategy. So whatever that looks like, it could be single or multi-platform strategies. And then I will basically make sure, it's reasonable for the channel teams that are involved in delivering it. And if it gets deployed and we start to, notice that performance needs to move in one direction over another, I need to hold myself accountable to that strategy. And I do think that if we put that in the lens of SEO and agency versus freelancer, when you deploy a strategy in an agency as an SEO, you can kind of hide behind certain things. If it works or it doesn't work, it doesn't really matter, in the sense of, well, there's all these other channels that could support me. But when you're just doing freelance SEO, the strategy matters more than anything else, because you need to be able to get reward very quickly, and you need to understand when to pivot and when to focus on different areas of performance.
So what would you say is the main differentiators between working with an unknown brand and a very successful brand?
The biggest is probably just maturity and market. Underdog brands typically have this mindset of, well, that's the big market leader in my space and I want to be just like them. And it normally results in some form of copycat strategy, which never works because they haven't really thought it through. It's very exciting. It's very fresh. They've got a bank full of money from a seed round and they're ready to go, take on the world. A big mature brand is very aligned with, the market in general, consumer behavior. The flip side of that narrative is big established brands are very slow to move. So they don't see trends happening as quickly as these underdog brands, which means that actually the underdogs have an advantage in that sense. And then the bigger brands are always the last to react, but because they've got the deeper pockets, they can claim back market share pretty quick.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on the whole conversation about, well, Google just prioritize the big brands? I mean, they dominate for everything. So how are these others supposed to get a look in?
I think if you're an SEO and that's your mindset, I think you're in the wrong career. I think if you believe there is only one route to market, I think you need to try something else.
You know what? You've hit
Agree?
the nail on the head. I mean, there's always opportunities. There's always things. And like you said, working with a lesser known brand, you can implement things a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've worked with big, well-known brands in the past. I still do now and again. But it's like I get so frustrated that it takes so long for something to get actioned. I mean, like there were a fashion brand that I think had 150 stores around the country who got me to do a full strategy plan. I got well paid for it. And like, I contacted them a month later to say, well, how did it go? Oh, no, we don't have any time to do this stuff. So what was the point? And I think I mean, that's the reality of things. It's not just that you work with a big brand and you've got a pot of money and you can do anything you want. There's the structure and the hierarchy and the process you need to go through to get anything approved before you can implement it.
Yeah, 100. And you'll get big brands come to you looking to execute something 6 months later. I did a piece of work in January, February time, and it's for something that isn't looking to happen until the start of 2025, because they know how much stuff they have to get through first. And it's normally covered in red tape. There is normally a centralized pot of money that people are fighting for. There is normally higher priority business things that are going on, and SEO and PR is never in the top three, or rarely in the top three. So it becomes really slow. And the execution of those strategies becomes really long and played out. So the underdogs in that sense have a big opportunity. And I just think with the right guidance, I think underdogs should learn how to deploy their budget more effectively. And if they learn that properly, then they'll be able to eat market share a lot quicker.
So with your background and everything you've gone through, how would you explain how freelancers and agency owners could generate more customers? What do they need to do in order to push forward and drive them new customers their way?
Do you know what? I think the issue is I mean, I've spoken to a lot of freelancers and, smaller agency owners. They typically have relied on things like word of mouth and referrals as a lead generation stream, which is great. It will work until it doesn't. The problem with those two streams is that they will dry up, and it's in my experience a very short time scale when that does dry up. What people don't do, or freelancers in particular, I'm going to speak to freelancers in particular, is they don't invest in advertising or marketing at all. They just think, like you said, they're going to go freelance and people are just going to come knocking on their door immediately, handing them cash. And it just doesn't work like that. Like I've spent myself out of my own pocket close to £50,000 on equipment, courses, advertising, flights, conferences, all of these things to try and network and put myself in positions where people know who I am. And if you're not willing to invest in yourself, why would you ever expect anybody to invest in you? It just doesn't work. There are again, it's the same as SEO. There are only a few ways you can win new clients: cold outreach, personalized outreach, cold emails, or inbound leads. Like, it's one of the four kind of spectrums, one-to-one or one-to-many. And if you're doing none of them, then of course you're never going to get clients. If you do one and it doesn't work, try one of the other three. It's just like, you've got to keep going until something sticks.
I think a lot of freelancers I talk to say, well, they actually white label to agencies. So they've left an agency to build their own business and end up white labeling to an agency, and they can't build the clients up because essentially they've just got a job.
Yep.
So because they left the job, found out they couldn't generate new work, they offer the services white label to agencies, and it's like they're stuck in a rut.
Yeah, 100%. And again, that is pure lack of business acumen, in my opinion, and pure lack of investment in themselves to be able to figure out what it takes to build a business. Like, if you're not cut out for it, then I would actively persuade people not to do it. Try something else. Start a side hustle, start an e-com shop online where you can do something on the weekend. It doesn't matter if you make money from it or not. But if your bills need to be paid and you've got, let's just say, for example, a $2,000 chunk of money every single month that's got to leave your bank. If you don't know how to go and secure business, it's probably going to end, like you said, you're either going to be stuck working for cheap, that you're never going to get out of because you don't know how to get out of it, or B, it's going to fail and it's going to kick your confidence really hard. So you might as well learn how to do these things before you start your business.
So the time has rocked on. Now, is there anything that we haven't spoken about so far that you really believe the audience needs to know?
I think we've covered a lot of good ground. I do, hopefully, I'm not sure who's going to listen to this and who's not going to listen to this, but from a if it's freelancers specifically, one thing I would love to just drill into people's heads is that making £1 million is cool. There's no doubt about it. Making money on your own terms for the rest of your life is way cooler. So don't worry about the shortcuts. Don't listen to the gurus or the course sellers. Figure out how you can sustainably make yourself money every single month for the rest of your life. That's a cool thing to do. Go and figure that bit out.
Definitely. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be able to retire. But,
Yeah.
well, where can people find you and what conversations would you like to have with them?
You can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. So Twitter, my handle is search for Ryan. And on LinkedIn, it's just Ryan Darani. Conversations I would love to have more of is people who want to build sustainable, realistic businesses who are maybe in the position of they don't know where they sit in the market. You know, they don't understand how to position themselves, they don't know how to personal brand, and they don't know how to do lead gen. Anything like that, I'm all ears.
Wonderful. On that note, many, many thanks for joining me today, Ryan.
Cheers, Mark. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Unscripted SEO Interview Podcast with me, Mark A. Preston. Join us next time as I interview more top SEO professionals.